Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Out of the Fog. I'm your host, Erin Sully. Thanks very much for joining us tonight as we bring you a special presentation to mark the first anniversary of the devastating wildfire in Fort McMurray, where about 15,000 Newfoundlanders and Labradorians call home. Now, it was an extremely intense wildfire that swooped in and took out neighborhoods like Beacon Hill and Wood Buffalo and heavily damaged homes in the neighborhood of Abasand. A fire that was later nicknamed the Beast, which caused about 700 families to locate back to this province. They were among the 80,000 residents displaced. Now, it's truly unimaginable to think about what people endured trying to flee their home and escape the flames that consumed so much of their community. As you'll hear tonight, it was traumatic. There was fear, but also resilience and strength when looking towards the future. Over the next 60 minutes, we're going to reconnect with Bob Hodder, whom we spoke to 1 year ago, a former resident of Abasand, Fort McMurray, and we'll find out how he's doing now and why they decided not to return to their home. I'll also be sitting down with a former Salvation Army shelter manager who experienced the fear and sense of loss firsthand while working with so many people who were evacuating their homes. Plus, what happened to that $319 million that the Canadian Red Cross raised? Ron Kenny will be by to tell us how it has and still is being utilized today. And rebuilding of Fort McMurray, bronze sculptor Morgan MacDonald gives us a sneak peek of his latest project, plus Dinner TV Edmonton host Courtney Theriault joins me from Fort McMurray to break down what's happening on the ground today and to tell us about their live show, which follows Out of the Fog tonight starting at 8:30 p.m. We're taking a very short break, but when we return, life after the fire.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Well, my first guest tonight joins me by phone, Bob Hodder, who is from this province, but like many Newfoundlanders, made a home out west. Now, his family was one of thousands deeply affected by the wildfire. Now, we last spoke to Bob the day after he fled from his home, Abasand, Fort McMurray, with his dog, his wife's jewelry, and propane tank that was on the porch. And like others, he headed towards a locked highway where he eventually made it to Edmonton to be with his wife. And given it is a year later, we thought that we'd check back in with Bob to see how much has changed since that time. Bob, great to speak with you.
Thanks, Erin. It's good to speak to you, too.
You as well. So last time we spoke, as was mentioned, you made it to Edmonton. You were in a hotel room at that time, and you were just recovering from a very long drive to get to safety and to be with your wife.
Right. I'd been up all night because I had to sleep on the side of the road. After that, we went on down to my stepson's place in Sylvan Lake for a couple of weeks, and kept in touch. They did a lot of town halls, which were online and radio meetings of the council and the authorities to try to keep the community informed of what was happening. And so we were away for the better part of a month before people were let back in Fort McMurray. Although I came up earlier because I work with heavy-duty equipment, and some companies, they asked us to come back after a couple of weeks to help with the cleanup so the general population could get back in. So I was back up after, I guess, 2.5 weeks after I spoke to you. Mm-hmm. And when I came back up, I remember wondering what it would be like in an hour or so, hour and a half outside of the city on the highway. Could start seeing the burnt trees and everything, and realize how widespread it was because it moved right on over to Saskatchewan. The fire. And then my wife came back up, I guess in June when they had a general recall and we were allowed back in. And it was kind of bittersweet because when the 90% of the people evacuated, their houses were maybe received a little smoke damage, but the 10% who were burned out or mostly destroyed and dislocated for a long time, it was kind of like a tale of two cities. You could, some people are moving on, and others, well, they're couch surfing or they're staying at with relatives or something like that. So depending on what neighborhood you lived in, it hit you harder.
How would you describe, now that we're marking 1 year, the anniversary since the fires, how would you describe your neighborhood of Absinthe?
They're starting to build up. It was about 75% destroyed. I lived on a cul-de-sac that had, 5 houses on each side, and all the houses across the street were completely leveled. Our side was melted from heat, so our house kind of looked like a popsicle on the outside, and it was the structure was the integrity of the structure was affected by it. So the main thing that we faced when we came back up was uncertainty. First off, before we came back, that we'd have a job, which we both had. Unfortunately for us, the house was standing, which it was, but then, the degree of damage, we couldn't ascertain that until we got back up here with insurance. And when we did get back up and looked at the neighborhood is like someone who had chemotherapy, and they're a shadow of who they used to be until if they recover and it gets better. It's going to take a long time. Out the back of our way, there's the Athabasca River. Takes a nice turn way down over the hill, and it used to be just beautiful. It's something like the Waterford Valley back home, but it's all thinned out. You'll really tell in another month or so when all green comes into different parts, and the contrast with the burnt parts is going to stand out even more. But when you're right in the town, you don't see the burnt out areas much, so as you drive up into the 3 or 4 areas that were mainly hit, you don't see the extent of it. But right now up in Navasand, they're building, and in Beacon Hill and Waterways too. Those are the other neighborhoods mainly hit, and Stony Creek up on the other side. So I see houses being framed up all the time. Not as much as I would have hoped or thought it would last year, because they didn't know the health aspects of the whole area. So basically the whole summer was missed for billing last year until the chief medical officer made it possible for everybody to return home.
And
so when we did, we settled with our insurance. We were going to retire to BC in 2 years anyway, so we just rented another house for the next year and a half. So
when we last talked a year ago, you mentioned at that time that you didn't think that the town would be the same again. Are you still of that mind?
Well, it certainly slowed. It's hard to tell exactly the reasons for it. The lower price of oil certainly took effect on how many people are working up here, and the fire did it again. There's lots of for sale signs, houses, but I don't see many of them moving very fast because people probably don't trust, the future here at the oil. And some people, I guess, got burned out. A lot of them were newts, and, if they went home and they had a chance to stay home, a lot of them like to do that. The town, it seems to me like it's probably down a third from what it used to be. That's the way it seems. I don't have any numbers on that, but I used to always be in traffic going and coming to work, and that's not anymore. I'm still in traffic, but it moves on pretty easily instead of getting jammed up like it used to. A lot of small businesses didn't come back, and some supermarkets didn't open again. There's still lots of people out there. I don't know how many here, 75,000 or something, I suppose, between here and the camps, but it's like a town that, it's been blown over and standing up, but it's not quite back on its feet. Not to my mind, anyway.
You touched on this a little earlier, but I want to just revisit this in regards to, what you're doing now. Do you plan on moving back, or what does your future hold?
Well, because of my age, I'm only 2 years away from retirement, and while I came from St. John's, we lived in Vancouver for 20 years before we moved up here in 2011. So it was always a plan for us to move up here, just for the work and the money, and then when we're finished to go back to BC or back east. And we're going to do that probably in Vancouver Island, and with luck, maybe a cottage in the Avalon Peninsula area for July and August only. I moved to get away from the weather, so I still like nice weather out west.
Well, Bob, that future sounds very bright. I want to thank you very much for your time here this evening. Wishing you all the best, and thanks again for taking the time to speak with us.
Okay, and thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.
I got back, big guy. Join us in our mission to help protect backs at work.
If I stopped breathing, would you know what to do?
Welcome back to Out of the Fog and our special broadcast as we mark the first anniversary of the Fort McMurray wildfire. Now, as we know, there is a huge contingent of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians working in Fort Mac. My next guest, Kate Penny, was working there for the Salvation Army at the time of the fires as a shelter manager and joins me now to tell us about her experience. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
So let's start off with, you were a former shelter manager at the Salvation Army, and that's what you were doing. You were working in the shelter at the time of these wildfires. Tell me a little bit about what that entailed.
Initially, that entailed us being called out, actually prior to the evacuation of Fort McMurray. So there was fire 2 days prior, and we had set up down in McDonald Island, which was the area where everyone was going to for evacuation, and had set up just personal hygiene products, counseling, people to be there to stand, things for pets and things like that for the first people who had been asked to leave and evacuate their homes.
How would you describe the situation at that time?
It was something that you just went into the mode of just, that's the work we did. And so I think it was quite a while before we started to realize how much this was encompassing and actually the effect of it. I actually left and someone else came on shift and I went home and went to bed and then went to work the next day, and the day actually of the evacuation. And it was much later in the day before we started to realize how things had gotten out of control and the imminent danger and what things were happening and how the weather had changed and things had started to become more concerning. I can remember having one of the staff come to me and say, "Can you come here with me for a second?" And I went to the back and looked out a window where I could see the flames on the hill that were probably a lot closer than we had anticipated that they would be. And so then we had to make some conscious decisions as to what we were going to do. And that involved us housing individuals who were the chronic homeless and for people who were in an emergency shelter situation, and to just go right into what you needed to do to make sure that they were safe and they were relocated.
What are your thoughts looking back now, knowing that it's a year later and, all these memories that you have of just in that mode of helping people and just trying to help your own families as well at the time?
Yes, my daughter and her husband both work on site, and so that was very difficult to know that they were on site working, and that she had a 2-year-old son at the time, and he was with a babysitter, and you knew all kinds of circumstances of people. There's children in school. There's lots of things happening then. And I think when you didn't realize the full result of it until you were in that line of traffic, that normally would take you probably 25 minutes to get from downtown Fort McMurray up to Syncrude or up to Shell, Albion Sands, or wherever you're going. I had done that before and had traveled up there numerous times. And for it to take 8.5 hours, bumper to bumper. I can remember a gentleman on a motorcycle next to me. We had a case of water. We were giving him water, things like that. And just everyone was just kind of, I think, in shock and numb maybe, and just looking to see where this went and how long. I don't think at that point anybody really realized the magnitude of what was happening. and everybody was looking at it more as a precaution and a safety. I don't think any of us at that time realized exactly how much area that was going to encompass. And flying back in then afterwards and seeing from the air for me was very difficult. I can remember not even being able to understand how it could have spread so far and looking at it. And I can remember how everyone was just quiet on the plane. And I think we were the second flight fly in back into Fort McMurray. And then a baby cried on the airplane. And then you could hear others. And it was just very emotional for everyone to see the devastation and what exactly it looked like from the air.
Now, you're just back. You left in January.
Yes.
So you saw some of the rebuilding taking place. What kind of comes to your mind as you're watching this community in this large area and seeing that devastation? Them, they're looking towards the future and trying to bring Fort Mac back to what it was.
The compassion and the kindness and the magnitude of the strength and resiliency of the people in Fort McMurray was something that I'll always hold on to and be proud that I was there for part of that. They built that town. They built and carved a life out there. And they're determined that they're going to continue to do so. Fort McMurray lost a lot as far as their safety and comfortability and the things that you take for granted. But they gained a lot of other things, of knowing of compassion and community and of a desire to still continue to live there, and what that community means to them was more than what they lost.
This is still clearly very emotional for you, even sitting here and talking about that. I see, Fort McMurray and the residents and people are very much still in your heart.
Definitely. It'll always be that way. I have family there, but I have a lot of good memories of Fort McMurray and of what happened during that time, the strength of the people, and those who lost so much that were still out there, the first responders and everyone who had lost their own homes. I think of Emily and Ryan, and who were youth that were lost their lives on the highway, and how that was ground shaking, and how devastating that was when we heard that news. And think about, though, how people are rebuilding and how they're looking to a future again, and that everyone is taking and trying to be positive about it. And people have had a lot of different experiences. Everyone's experience is unique to them and to their own family and friends and community. But it's just as difficult for those who didn't lose anything, as far as their homes and things like that. I know people who worked on site and used to come home crying because they're the only one on their team who never lost their home, and the guilt that they had about that. And, just wanting to be able to help people build their homes and do things to help put things back. So Fort McMurray has a lot of positive things going on there, and it will continue to. There's a lot of amazing people in Fort McMurray that's built and is the life breath of that community, is the people that live there, and it'll be back even greater than it was before.
Well, Kate, we're going to have to leave it there for this evening, but I want to thank you very much for your time here tonight and joining me in studio.
Thank you very much.
Wood Buffalo is one of the hardest hit areas in Fort McMurray. Sharon Kelly and her family still question as to how their house even survived as the top of their street was burnt to the ground. Now, over this past year, they've had to replace a lot. And to tell us about it firsthand, about their experience and what life is like now 1 year later, Sharon Kelly joins me now by phone from her home in Fort McMurray. Welcome. Great to have you here on the show.
Thank you for having me.
What comes to your mind when you think about it being 1 year since this fire took place?
It's still pretty fresh. You just, when you start thinking about it and talking about it, you can still have that feeling of panic, I guess, that happened that day.
When we spoke a few days ago, you compared the destruction to a war zone, to, in a foreign country. So just tell us a little bit more about that in terms of, I guess, the mass destruction that did take place a year ago.
I mean, when we first came back into town, there was a lot of, when they put out the fire, there was a lot of, I guess, chemicals they put over everything. So it was like white. Everything was white, so it was ghostly. When you came back, and there was areas of town, like even just behind where I live, there was another area, and there was no homes anymore, which there was probably 40 homes out there, out my back window, and then when you look in, there was nothing. It was just barren ground and rubble.
That must have been shocking to you and your family. It's
horrendous. It was horrendous coming back.
Tell me about your house and what you came back to.
Well, first, I mean, when we left, as I said, it's not like you stood there and watched anything happen, some burn. You had to leave, and you had no idea what was happening. And because it was the whole town, you had no one to tell you, your house is gone, or house is there. So we had no idea for the first few days of, you heard reports that it was gone, and then you hear someone say, no, I think your end of the street survived. And so that was a whole emotional roller coaster. Mm-hmm. And when we finally got confirmation, you got visual confirmation, on the front of the house, it looked normal. We thought, oh, we're good. And then it was a couple of days later when we saw the back of the house, and that was where the whole homes behind us were destroyed. So the fire did come into our yard. It destroyed our fence and our shed, and it melted all the siding and the windows and doors off the back. And so then you wonder, how much smoke damage. Luckily, we had closed all the windows, and I turned off the air conditioning. So we didn't have smoke damage or much. We obviously have to have the insulation and stuff taken out. But when you come back in and you think, I remember coming in my door, and I thought, I'm home. It's like home. And when I came into my house, with the power being gone for however many, I think we had it on for 26 days, the smell was just atrocious. And when I just thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to clean all this? And then when I came to the backyard and saw what happened and how close we were, it was just this overwhelming sense of gratitude, joyfulness that we are able to be home. So right now it's just gratitude that you can see the town rebuilding. So
give us a glimpse as to what the town looks like now, 1 year later, in terms of there's been a lot of discussion about the rebuilding of Fort McMurray.
There is a lot of rebuilding. It's almost becoming a lot of areas of town right now that the hardest hit areas are new subdivisions going in because there was so much destruction. So you see, when you go in the other new subdivision, there's a lot of new builds and houses that are going up. So it's nice to see some of them are getting bigger and better and new. So there's a lot of new industry or anything like that around, but it's a lot of new homes. And there's people, when you look out and you can see a moving truck with someone moving themselves back in, it's pretty exciting for them. And you think, okay, we did survive.
So you seem hopeful. I can sense the positivity in your voice in regards to moving into the future to a new Fort McMurray.
One of the big things that they said, we're strong, resilient, and together. So when I think, and I look around that people are coming back, Fort McMurray's been home for us for 20 years. It's been great to us, and it's same a lot of people. It's community. So when you go out and you see all these people, my kids played hockey, so you have all these friends and your coworkers, and you see that they're not leaving, that they are staying and sticking it out and rebuilding. And some have had a lot of struggles with insurance issues and things like that, but they're persevering. So you look and think, we are strong. We are coming back. And kids are, back to schools, and they're opening the schools that are in the harder hit areas. They're going to open them up in September. So, by the end of the summer, hopefully everything is going to be even more normal.
There's a percentage of people who aren't moving back into Fort McMurray. So just give us some sense of, do you think that there will be some normalcy? And when you talk about kids going back to school, there's people obviously building new homes. So you see light at the end of the tunnel.
Sometimes I look at it and I say, okay, maybe that was a blessing in disguise, because there were things, now you can build your house that you wanted. There's all this color. I mean, a lot of areas of town are just basic color. Now everybody's putting different color siding on. So everything is brightening up. And I guess that's the word I'm looking for, is brightening up. And the future looks bright. I mean, people are coming back. And the people that thought Fort McMurray is home, some of the people that are not coming back were the ones that are ready to retire or had other plans anyway. I know some of my friends had already planned on moving. Like, I have one friend that decided to move back home. And so, they've taken the step. I guess the fire made that step happen. But for the most part, people that were here and are coming back are standing strong and just keeping going.
Well, Sharon, I want to thank you very much for your time here this evening, and wishing you all the best as you look towards a new, very positive and bright future in Fort McMurray.
Thank you very much.
Well, folks, we are going to take a very short break, but stay with us. Our special presentation continues as we mark the first anniversary since the wildfires in Fort McMurray. $390 million, the total amount raised to help. Rhonda Kenny of the Canadian Red Cross will be here to tell us how it was used. That's coming up right after this.
Any job worth doing is worth doing using the right tools. It's so much easier on your back. So, if you're going to be using your back, ask yourself, is there a tool for that?
If I stopped breathing, would you know what to do?
Huntington's disease is a hereditary degenerative disease of the brain.
It affects your behaviors, your mind.
And it's a relentless disease.
If you took Alzheimer's, if you took schizophrenia, if you took Parkinson's, and you mix them all together, you would have Huntington's disease.
Huntington's disease is devastating.
So I just hope that I'm the last.
Welcome back to Out of the Fog and our special broadcast as we mark the first anniversary of the Fort McMurray fires. Now, due to the sheer devastation and so many people being displaced from their homes in Fort Mac, many fundraising efforts kicked in across the country, including many here in our community. Now, we were very happy to broadcast and take part in the VOCM Cares Radiothon. It was called Help Fort McMurray last year, and happy to see that we, like many of you, played a small part in the total number of $319 million. Now, that is the total number that the Canadian Red Cross raised from all sources, and that includes matching government funds. Now, here to discuss how that money was and still is being utilized today is Rhonda Kenny, Provincial Director for the Canadian Red Cross here in Newfoundland and Labrador, and she's also the Director of Disaster Management for the Atlantic region. Great to have you here in studio.
Thank you, Erin.
So I know that this, this was a huge disaster, as we all saw a year ago, but just talk about your organization and the enormity of the disaster response.
Yeah, it was actually, you're right. It's hard to believe that 1 year ago this disaster occurred, and certainly we're very much involved in continuing, our work with the community today and certainly into the future. But it was the largest disaster response by the Canadian Red Cross in the history. And, you know, that community, over 85,000 people were evacuated in a very short period of time. So the outpouring support, you know, from coast to coast by our Canadians was tremendous, outstanding. So the reference $319 million was raised. And it was the first time in the history of the Red Cross that we had dispersed the funds so quickly. So within the first 72 hours after the evacuation, the Red Cross dispersed over $50 million through the electronic transfer of funds. We've spent so far $227 million, and that went directly to individuals and to families. We continue to do our work by allocating $50 million to small businesses and a little over $40 million to community groups and organizations.
So that money is being utilized in a great way.
Absolutely, and right from the start, right, with the disbursement of the $50 million in transfer. And Aaron, it was incredible. I mean, certainly in Newfoundland and Labrador, you know, the connection between Newfoundland and Labrador and Fort McMurray. So, you know, we had our team of volunteers here in this province who really stepped up to the plate. And we were involved in a number of different elements of the response.
So what took place on the ground here in Newfoundland and Labrador? Because we know that thousands of families who, of course, moved up there and actually ended up coming home.
Absolutely, yes. So the Red Cross, we were here in this province. We were part of a call center operation. So there were 15 call centers right across the country. And here in our province, we manned that call center for 3 weeks by volunteers, individuals from Fort McMurray who registered. We're looking for information referrals, and so it was quite interesting. And you can imagine, you know, someone from Fort McMurray, you know, calling to get assistance by the Canadian Red Cross, and then recognizing the Newfoundland accent, and then, you know, a 5-minute conversation just translates into a 45-minute conversation. So there was a real connection there, you know, with our volunteers and certainly with our people here in the province in supporting, you know, the individuals who were directly impacted. So call center operations were certainly a big piece of the work that we did here. In addition to sending 15 of our disaster management volunteers from this province directly to Alberta, and they worked in a number of different areas: shelter management, human resources. They worked directly with case management with the clients, and we also sent 2 of our employees. So very much involved in supporting the operation in Alberta, but also, as you can imagine, there were over 700 families who came back to Newfoundland in transition, and we translated into over 1,600 individuals. So Red Cross worked directly with the clients and provided, you know, the very basic needs initially, which was food, you know, shelter. We assisted with housing, with clothing, and then some, you know, very special needs where Red Cross worked directly on a case-by-case basis with families and with individuals who resided in this province for months.
Tell me a little bit more about the volunteers, and only because we were talking earlier today and you talked about, you know, that 5-minute conversation could turn into a 45-minute conversation because, you know, a Newfoundlander in Fort McMurray who's facing this terrible situation, but just hearing that voice from home on the other end. So there was that sense of comfort.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, working directly in the call center, which was operational here in our office in St. John's, our provincial office, you know, the volunteers would come out, they would have breaks, and certainly they would be sharing their stories, and they felt, you know, a real sense of not only accomplishment, but a real sense of like humanitarian spirit in being able to provide some comfort, some relief, and certainly a friendly voice from home.
What is the feedback that you've received throughout the last year?
Yeah, certainly we've gotten some like very positive feedbacks from the corporate community, from our donors. We continue to provide them with updates. So we've provided them with, you know, a 3-month update, 6-month update, and now a 1-year update on the work of the Canadian Red Cross and how we're helping clients. So we've been getting very positive feedback from our donors, from the corporate community, from the citizens, but as equally as important, from the clients, people who we have assisted directly. So it's been quite positive.
As we mark 1 year here today,
yes.
Is the need still there? Are you still helping families?
Absolutely, yeah. Red Cross, and we're helping families here that have in Newfoundland and Labrador, people who have chosen not to go back for various reasons. We're providing that very immediate needs and then ensuring that there's good transition back into our province. But also we're located, we have an office in Fort McMurray. We have a team of trained staff and volunteers who are working directly with individuals, with families, to get them back on their feet. It will certainly be a long road ahead of them, but rest assured that Canadian Red Cross will be there to work side by side with the community and with the municipality and with the people.
I know that I want to ask you a bit of a personal question, a little bit removed from the Canadian Red Cross, in the sense that you were there through a lot and heard so many stories and obviously talked to so many people and were there through fundraising effort here throughout the city. What kind of goes through your mind as you reflect on the past year? Yeah, well, an incredible. Newfoundland and Labradorians, they step up to the plate, and certainly, in many disasters previous, and I'm sure disasters to come, I mean, they're almost the first person right off the mark. And with the strong connection between Alberta and Newfoundland and Labrador, I mean, people were just outpouring of support, opened their hearts, opened, anything that they can do to provide support. It was incredible. At our, offices across provinces, it was continuous, phone calls and emails, communication. What can we do to support? You referenced earlier the VOCM. Cares and their amazing contribution by hosting a radiothon, which brought in an incredible amount of financial resources to support our response in Alberta. Okay, Rhonda, we have to leave it there, but I want to thank you very much for your time here this evening. Thank you. Okay, we are going to take a very short break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Up next, how to mark such a disaster with a project aimed to capture the destruction and emotional fear and loss, but one which also allows the community to move forward with strength and determination. Bronze sculptor Morgan MacDonald has created amazing works throughout his career, which includes various war memorials, the Sealers Memorial in Elliston, and the RCMP Moncton Memorial. Now he's working on creating a piece for the people of Fort McMurray, and he joins me now to tell us a little more about it. Welcome to Joan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here. So, of course, as we mark this day, the first anniversary of the Fort Mac fires, I know you were there not too long after the destruction. Just tell me, what exactly came to your mind as you were driving around?
Well, I think it was last summer that I flew up and basically going around to see firsthand, because like everybody else, I've saw the footage on the news, and and seeing those images, some of those, and one of the things that stuck in my mind is that column of fire that people are just driving through, the forest on one side ablaze and a suburb on the other side just ablaze, and just thinking of how just incredibly dangerous that is. But and so you don't really get a sense of the scale of something like that until you actually put your 2 feet on the ground and look around and witness it. So I thought it was important to go up there and see it before it started to be cleaned up and remediated, and all the remnants of what had happened was gone. So I packed a camera and flew up and just basically try to contact somebody to show me around to the actual destruction. So it's pretty surreal. Hard to put into words.
And of course, we have some pictures which you are sharing with us this evening,
yeah.
So everybody can kind of really connect to what you're describing and what you saw at that time. Tell us about how this particular project came about. I know that you are always working on various things at the one time, but this special one for Fort McMurray.
Well, I think the connection that Newfoundland has with Fort McMurray. We're all familiar with that. And I thought, it was important to just do something for that and just recognize that and just kind of work through the the emotional component of that. So this is kind of what I do, kind of artwork that I do. So I thought it was it was important to go see it.
What did you take away from the people? I mean, obviously at that time we heard, lots of descriptions of, it was traumatizing. Obviously people felt a sense of loss, a loss of safety. What did you gather from the people of Fort McMurray?
Well, I think it was pretty shocking. I think mentally you kind of minimize these things in your own kind of consciousness, and so when I went out there and started just like a normal conversation you'd have with anybody, and realizing how much it has affected people and how traumatizing it really was. So when you hear people talk about it, you kind of just step back and so you're somewhat shocked at how impactful the whole event was, and it's a pretty stark landscape up there to see what has actually occurred up there.
What I know that you've been working on of course, I guess different aspects of what you'd like to see in this particular sculpture. Can you tell us a little bit about it? I know the unveiling obviously is months out yet.
Yeah, well, we're thinking of June to remote from the actual anniversary, because May 3rd is the anniversary of the actual event. But we're thinking in June to do something. But what we really wanted to have, and I should say, just artistically from my point of view, just to reflect the stories of the people that have gone through this, and just to give a few examples, like there's firefighters that their own houses had burned down, and during the whole thing they're actually still out there fighting to protect other people's homes, and they themselves lost their own houses, and just trying to encapsulate a broad story of that. So and another part of the component is with friends, and or I shouldn't say friends, but complete strangers, just helping one another out. So whether it was again stories of people with handing out free gas to stranded travelers on the highway, or one of the other stories that I was told was here's my pickup truck, here's the keys, we'll figure it out later, just get out of town. So that kind of stuff, which is it's incredibly moving to realize that spirit is still out there.
And these stories, that's what you collect,
yes,
and that really makes an impact on your work.
Oh yeah, it's the most important part of it. It's what drives the work. It's what makes the piece special. It's what makes and just the form of the artwork that I do, it lends itself to encapsulating that and probably bringing it more to the forefront, and having it out there for people to experience and just move forward in the healing process of this as well.
Mm-hmm. You talked obviously a little bit about that, because I was going to ask you, what is it that you want residents to really take away from this? And we mentioned off the top of this interview, obviously there's a lot of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians who, I guess you could call it a little bit, the rock is certainly there, and a lot of people were displaced and came back home.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's thematically, it's that, that human spirit still exists, the resilience of people. It's, I mean, it's still not over for a great deal of residents. They're, we're looking at, now's the time. This, summer is upon us, which is, prime building time. So, they had to go through a whole entire winter just homeless, and I experienced Fort McMurray winter this for the first time, and we might complain here, but I mean, it's pretty cold up there too. So, but yeah, the piece it's about recognizing that their stories are being told. They're not alone, and just bringing that to the forefront.
I want to thank you very much for joining me here this evening and telling us a bit about this particular piece, which will be revealed in June. So really looking forward to seeing it.
Thank you.
We're going to take a very short break, folks. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Any job worth doing is worth doing using the right tools. It's so much easier on your back. So, if you're going to be using your back, ask yourself, is there a tool for that?
If I stopped breathing, would you know what to do?
Huntington's disease is a hereditary degenerative disease of the brain.
It affects your behaviors, your mind.
And it's a relentless disease.
If you took Alzheimer's, if you took schizophrenia, if you took Parkinson's and you mix them all together, you'd have Huntington's disease.
Huntington's disease is devastating.
I just hope that I'm the last.
Welcome back to the show. Coming up directly after Out of the Fog at 8:30 p.m., we bring Dinner Television Edmonton's live special. It's called The Healing of Fort McMurray. Host Courtney Theriault is in Fort McMurray now and joins me to tell us about what's happening on the ground today and their upcoming show. Great to have you with us.
A pleasure to be here, and it certainly is an interesting day here in Fort McMurray. A lot of people, a lot of residents would say that this is simply a Wednesday, another day on the calendar, as the events of the day are more of an acknowledgement than they are of a commemoration of what transpired here 365 days ago. We are here down at Sny Park at an event that the city has described as a tranquil event, where the goal here is to help people with their healing. Certainly that is a process that remains very much occurring as things are going along right now. And so this is fairly tame. We do anticipate a little bit later on today that there will be a much larger crowd, barbecue slated for here around the supper hour. We're talking with several individuals, those who have lost their homes, those who are still in the process of healing, as well as Brian Jean, who's the MLA for the region, who he himself also lost a home in the wildfire.
So you mentioned earlier that this is just another Wednesday. Do you get the sense that people want to actually mark this anniversary or just kind of let it pass by?
I think for the most part, people here will be glad to see May 4th arrive. I think you take a look at what's happening in schools here around the community, and administrators and teachers have told us that their goal is to talk about it if the kids want to, but that otherwise it will be business as usual for them. And I think that fits into the notion that this has been something that they've had to deal with on a daily basis for the last 12 months. And for some people, as we say, the healing process, they've reached the end of that journey. They've found the normal again. But then there are those who continue to suffer, are frustrated on a daily basis, whether it comes with the fact that they're still waiting to have their home built, that they're having issues with how insurance is being handled at this juncture, or arguments with the city. There are still definitely a lot of people here still trying to find their normal. I think we figured it out to about 29,000 references for mental health services here in Fort McMurray. If you do the quick math, that's about 1 in 3 residents.
With the, you heard from the Premier earlier on today, was there a main message that was given to residents of Fort McMurray?
Rachel Notley did speak alongside Fort McMurray Mayor Melissa Blake, and I think the message was pretty straightforward. It's that the spirit of Alberta is strong here in Fort McMurray, and that from tragedy, you see the best in people, and nowhere is that more prevalent than what we've seen here on the ground. The Premier did acknowledge 2 lives that were lost, not to the fire directly, but in the evacuation. A pair of young individuals killed in a fiery crash on the highway south of the community. And that's the thing, I think, too, that people do want to acknowledge, is that there were a couple of lives lost. Not everybody managed to escape, and even those who didn't lose a home certainly lost something here. The phrasing that I keep hearing a lot is that they lost their sense of safety. And so today, Premier Rachel Notley did her best to let Fort McMurray know, to remind Fort McMurrayites that they've not been forgotten and that the province will be there as this reconstruction, as this rebuild, both in terms of buildings and in terms of people, continues for the coming years.
We're airing your show called The Healing of Fort McMurray coming up at 8:30 p.m., which is directly following Out of the Fog here this evening. Give a sense of what our viewers can expect to hear and see from your show.
Well, this program was designed largely to look ahead. We do acknowledge what happened on May 3rd. We definitely revisit the evacuation, as we know, which is the largest evacuation in Canadian history. But we wanted to focus on some of the positives, on some of the healing processes that have taken place. We've talked to one individual who sidestepped from his job, took time off his job to build his house. And it's worth noting, it's the very first house that he's ever built. We've talked to a family that has found their healing through art, a young girl who's using her music to help her friends find their normal, and her mother turning to charcoal that she found in the charred out remains of the forests here in Fort McMurray. She's now using that to create paintings that she's handing to complete strangers as a commemoration, as an acknowledgement of what happened. So we touch on these stories here, as well as taking a broader look at scope of things, taking a look at the economy, taking a look at the mental anguish that still exists here. Startling statistic that we got from one of the psychologists here, suggesting that as many as 15% of Fort McMurray residents are currently suffering some signs of PTSD. So a good sense of what is happening here in northern Alberta. That is what you can expect tonight on The Healing of McMurray.
Well, Courtney, I want to thank you very much for your time here this evening, and of course, really looking forward to seeing The Healing of Fort McMurray, your show coming up here on Rogers TV live at 8:30 p.m. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And it was Dinner Television, Edmonton's host, Courtney Theriault, speaking with us from Fort McMurray this evening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the show so far. You can call us at 757-9600. You can send us your comment via email, outofthefog@rci.rogers.com. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, many ways to touch base with us and share your thoughts here this evening. We're going to take a very short break, but we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
That concludes our special tonight as we mark the first anniversary of the wildfire in Fort McMurray. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, and a reminder to stay with us as Dinner Television Edmonton special. It's called The Healing of Fort McMurray is coming up in just a few minutes at 8:30 p.m. here on Rogers TV. You can tune in on Channel 9 on our website. It's also streaming live on our Rogers TV YouTube page. Now, as we say goodnight, we're going to leave you with a song we found on YouTube by a young lady, Mercedes Staley, who lost her home in the fire. She wrote her own words to the song Let Her Go by Passenger as she wanted to express her experience and how much she misses Fort McMurray. We're going to leave you with that now. Hope you have a wonderful evening, everyone. Good night. We'll see you soon.
Fort McMurray under siege by flames. The entire northern Alberta city of 80,000 was evacuated. Getting access to neighborhoods is still extremely dangerous. Emergency officials say nowhere in Fort McMurray is safe right now.
And there was nowhere to go. I mean, like, they're evacuating us, but the traffic was just blocked. Everything was gridlocked. There was nowhere anyone could go.
Only need your home when it's running low. Only miss the sun when it starts to glow. Only know it's coming when you see the smoke. Only know it's high when it's spinning low. Only hate the road